Hey everybody, David the AI Guide, where we're making AI human. What do we mean by that? We mean that we're focusing on the human aspect of this technology and what the impact, both good and not good, is going to be on all of us. So today we're doing a smorgasbord of news from this past week because there was a lot going on, including the Consumer Electronics Show, the CES show, which was virtual this year for the obvious reason. Hopefully next year they can actually have a real live in-person CES in Las Vegas. We can hope. So first things first, came across news out of China that the government of China is testing a digital yuan, which is the Chinese currency. So this is different than cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is a speculative investment. What does that mean? It means you can buy it and make money or lose money because its value is constantly changing. It is not a standard currency. A standard currency, like the US dollar for us, has the same value every day, at least within the United States. The same is true for the yuan in China. So what they did is they picked two cities. They gave some of the citizens there, converted their cash to digital currency and had them go into stores and spend it. And the initial response was pretty good from people. And it was interesting because the Chinese government was unusually direct about why they were doing it. They said, we want to do this so that we can better understand how our citizens spend their money. Well, that hit the nail on the head pretty well because this idea has been around for a little while, but the big concern with it is privacy and the government knowing every dime you ever spend. So we'll see how this evolves, but this is very likely to happen. And in the future, a day will come when there's no paper currency. Why? Because paper currency is extremely expensive. First of all, you have to make the paper, special paper to put to print, and then you have to print it, and then you have to distribute it, and then once it's in circulation, you have to have all these armored trucks going all over the place, picking it up, dropping it off, and the banks have to manage it and handle it, and it's super expensive. I really didn't appreciate that till I read a different article about how expensive it is to handle physical currency. So digital currency is most likely going to be here sooner or later. It might be later because of some of these privacy concerns and the natural human resistance to it. But once it comes, it will mean a profound shift for the economy. How's that, you ask? Well, there will be no more payments under the table. That will come to a dead halt. No more paying people and avoiding cash and avoiding taxes. Why? The government will be checking and they will know that you're cheating on your taxes. And believe me, federal prison is stocked full of people cheating on their taxes. So that's not a road to go down. But anyway, that's for a much later date. So that was the first piece of news. The second piece of news is from the CES, and it's big. And that news is that Cadillac, a division of GM, General Motors, unveiled a flying Cadillac. So it's a concept right now, but I told you guys in a video a couple of months ago that a company in Florida is building right now one of these flying car air taxi services that is supposed to be ready to go with service for the common man, if you will, in 2 years. That's what they said. Now, we all know it takes longer, and there's approvals to get from the government and all that stuff. But let's say within maybe 3 years, there's going to be air taxis going back and forth between Orlando and Tampa, St. Pete. And Cadillac's car should be timed pretty perfectly for that market. Why? Because from concept to being able to sell a car at scale is about 3 years. It takes about 3 years for one of the big automakers to design, engineer, and rejigger a factory to build that vehicle. So I think it's very safe to say that 5 years from now, 2025, there will be flying cars, especially in major metro areas, and this will not be unusual pretty rapidly. So by 2030, they're going to be commonplace. This is going to be a huge change for people. In many ways, it will disrupt the airline industry, number one. Number two, it will disrupt long drives. And number three, it will accelerate the push to some sort of shared ground transportation, I think. Could be wrong about that. So very interesting that a big player is jumping into this market. And by the way, the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, and NASA have been working on this for years. They're almost done with the model to regulate air traffic of these new vehicles and integrate it into the national airspace. That's no more than a year off, according to NASA. So this is coming, and it's coming soon. So hat tip to the CES for showing us a high-end vehicle that may be used in this whole new transportation paradigm. And then the final thing is another article that has big implications for AI and other things we've talked about that are converging technologies. So that news is that the rate of population growth in the United States is falling, and it has fallen below replacement level. So what does that mean? Replacement level is 2.1 kids per family or couple or whatever it is. So why 2.1? Why the 0.1? Well, because some folks do not have kids. Some folks have one kid. Some folks have more than two kids, more than two. And believe it or not, there still is some small degree of infant and child mortality, I'm sorry to say. So 2.1 children per family equals keeping the current population where it is. The U.S. has dropped to 1.7. Why? Millennials are at the prime childbearing age, and the poor millennials have had to live through two major recessions, this one being the second one, and a pandemic, which hadn't happened for 100 years. So it's been a rough go for the millennials, and the rate of childbirth is tied very tightly to how people feel about the future. And right now, that's shaky, so childbirth is way down. At a 1.7 birth rate, that means that within 5 years or so, the population of the U.S., ignoring immigration, will peak and start to decline. So that is why immigration will actually, in 5 years or so, become a front and center topic, because without it, we'll have an outright declining population unless this trend changes, which it can. The trend can change if people become more confident about the future than we all feel at the moment. But let's keep in mind that the pandemic is a transitory thing. Even in the absence of the vaccines, the Spanish flu pandemic lasted for 3 years. So these things have a cycle. This cycle looks like it'll be shorter than that one due to technological advances, but there's still other factors at play in terms of size of family. Just for comparison purposes, Japan is at 1.4. So Japan has been dealing with this issue for 20 years now. And how have they dealt with it? Robotics, one of the converging technologies we've talked about. So a declining population will accelerate the implementation of robotics. And at first, that will be sort of invisible to the public because it'll be in factories, it'll be in warehouses, it'll be in places that aren't really visible to the general public. But over a little bit of time, meaning this decade, by 2030, we will start to see robots in retail establishments regularly. They're already out there. Some of the big chains, as I talked about on prior videos, have robots that greet you and know your name because they recognize your face and they know what you've bought before, and so they suggest things that might go with things that you've bought before. But these kind of robots will push into, let's say, Starbucks and stuff like that. Why? Because it's really hard for a lot of these businesses to get enough employees. I know from personal experience working in the tech industry for many years that getting qualified employees is extremely difficult. So if you can find a way to get employees that are cheaper, faster, and don't need time off, well, that becomes a compelling proposition. So a lot of news. Next video, we're going to do more news out of CES. Thanks so much for watching. And speaking of making AI human, we had serious technical difficulties yesterday. That's why we're a day late. But that's been resolved and we're back on schedule going forward. Thanks a lot. Take care. Please subscribe, share, like. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and shortly Instagram. Take care, everybody. Bye.